following is a feature presentation of the Replay Sports Channel, the home for great games. This telecast is copyrighted by the WFL for the private use of our audience. Any other use of this telecast or any pictures, descriptions, or accounts of the game without the WFL's consent is prohibited.
Usually when one team outgains another by nearly 200 yards, the game is an absolute blowout.
No, totally. It's usually a wrap.
Right. We expect the outcome on the field to just nearly reflect the raw data on the stat sheet. But when you step into the sudden death environment of a wildcard playoff weekend, that mathematical logic completely fractures.
It just goes right out the window.
Exactly. The spreadsheet goes up in flames, and we're left looking at a competitive landscape that just defies basic accounting. So today's deep dive is for those of you who want to understand the hidden architecture of winning when the stakes are highest.
Yeah, and it's a wild ride this time.
It really is. We're unpacking the source material from an utterly chaotic 2025 wildcard weekend. We're examining 4 drastically different matchups. We've got St. Louis versus Baltimore, Denver taking on Las Vegas, DC traveling to Philadelphia, and Arizona hosting Atlanta.
4 very, very different games.
All right, so our mission isn't just to recap who won and who lost. You don't need to spend hours scrolling through sports pages for that. We're going to deconstruct the anatomy of playoff survival. Why did teams that dominated on paper end up going home?
And how did backup quarterbacks and massive underdogs survive the pressure cooker?
Or even just completely flip the script on its head? Okay, let's unpack this, because to understand this weekend, we have to look past the final scores and start with, well, the most baffling theme across these reports, which is the illusion of dominance.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is how the value of a yard changes based on the calendar. In a midseason game, sheer volume of offense will often mask underlying structural flaws.
Because you have a safety net, right?
Exactly. A team can absorb a turnover or a negative play because they have a high probability of getting the ball back and trying again. The regular season rewards cumulative output. The playoffs, however, punish inefficiency with ruthless finality.
Let's look at the Denver and Las Vegas game to illustrate that exact point. The Las Vegas Outlaws completely controlled the pace of that game. They outgained the Denver Gold 430 total yards to just 249.
It's a massive gap.
It really is. They racked up 24 first downs. If you just handed someone that box score, they would assume Las Vegas won by 3 touchdowns. Yet Denver walked away with a 16-10 victory.
And the discrepancy really comes down to the catastrophic nature of the mistakes Las Vegas made. Jalen Hurts threw 3 interceptions in that game.
3 picks in a playoff game is just brutal.
It is, but it wasn't just the fact that he threw them, it was the mathematical leverage of where and when they happened. One of those picks came in the 4th quarter after Las Vegas had marched 72 yards deep into Denver territory.
So it's not just a lost possession. It's a massive swing in expected points. It's kind of like having 400 plus yards of offense, but turning the ball over 4 times is like owning this gorgeous high-performance sports car, but the steering wheel randomly falls off while you're on the highway.
That is a terrifying but incredibly accurate analogy.
Right. The gross numbers look incredibly impressive, but the underlying function is completely broken.
Wait, so is gross offensive yardage just completely overrated in the postseason?
Well, yes and no. An 80-yard drive that ends in an interception inside the opponent's 20-yard line is technically recorded as 80 yards of offensive production, but in reality, it operates as a defensive weapon.
Because of the field position.
Exactly. It flips field position, it exhausts the offensive line that just spent 10 plays blocking for no reward, and it injects this enormous psychological boost into the opposing defense. Denver didn't need to outgain Las Vegas, they just needed to let Las Vegas bankrupt themselves.
Which brings us to the DC versus Philadelphia game, where that concept was magnified to an almost absurd degree. The DC defenders walked onto a cold, rainy field in Philadelphia as 11-point underdogs.
They were a 6-9 team. Right, they had a losing record in the regular season. And Philadelphia treated them like a minor league team between the 20s. I mean, outgaining DC 426 yards to 224. The Stars dominated the first downs 25-16 and heavily skewed the time of possession.
Yeah, DC won that game 32-25. And they did it by completely hijacking the processing speed of Philadelphia's rookie quarterback, Drake May.
Yeah, May ended up throwing 3 interceptions and coughing up a fumble. And the sequence in the fourth quarter is just stunning to visualize.
It really is.
Philadelphia's driving, they're in striking distance to put the game away, and suddenly DC linebacker Fred Warner just unloads on May. The ball pops loose, Cam Taylor-Britt scoops it up and returns it 42 yards for a touchdown.
Just a total backbreaker.
Right. And then moments later, Philadelphia gets the ball back. May drops back to try and force a quick recovery, and Diamador Lenoir jumps the route, intercepts the pass, and takes it 67 yards to the house for another defensive touchdown.
So that's what, 18 unanswered fourth quarter points for DC?
Yes, it was wild.
If we look at the mechanics of why that happened, we find a masterclass in calculated risk. DC's defensive coordinator knew they couldn't match up athlete for athlete in a standard coverage scheme.
They just didn't have the guys for it.
Right. If they sat back in a traditional zone, Philadelphia would have methodically picked them apart. So, DC blitzed Drake May 52 times in that game.
52 times. I mean, that means on almost every single drop back, they were sending more rushers than Philadelphia had blockers to pick up.
Exactly. They forced a math problem on the offensive line and a time problem on the rookie quarterback.
Wow.
The average NFL quarterback has roughly 2.5 seconds to read the defense, go through his progressions, and release the ball. By blitzing 52 times, DC intentionally compressed that window to under 2 seconds.
So they willingly surrendered the short completions.
Yes, which explains the 400 yards of offense. They traded that in exchange for artificially speeding up May's internal clock.
They basically forced him into a state of cognitive overload.
Precisely. And when a rookie's brain is processing that much chaotic information, the physical mechanics break down. On the Fred Warner hit, the offensive line slid the wrong way because they misidentified the blitz package.
Which just left Warner completely unblocked.
Warner had a free run at the quarterback. And then on the Lenoir interception, the constant pressure had trained May to stare down his primary receiver just to get the ball out quickly.
Because he knew he was going to get hit.
Right. Lenoir, a veteran corner, read the quarterback's eyes, anticipated the throw, and beat the receiver to the spot. DC traded yardage for chaos, and the chaos paid out a massive dividend.
It makes you completely reevaluate the concept of a good defense. DC's defense looked terrible if you measure it by yards allowed, but it operated flawlessly if you measure it by stress applied.
That's a great way to put it.
So if Philadelphia showed us how pressure can completely shatter a young cornerback, the other 2 games on our slate serve as a masterclass in how to insulate a team from that exact same panic.
Weathering the storm, essentially?
Yeah. Exactly. Overcoming immediate adversity through resilience and brilliant Plan B execution. Let's start with St. Louis. The Battlehawks suffered a catastrophic blow, losing their star quarterback, Tua Tagovailoa, to an injury.
And the immediate assumption when a backup enters a playoff game is that the offensive ceiling just completely collapses.
Right, but here's where it gets really interesting. Cooper Rush wasn't just adequate, he was pristine. He went 22 of 28 for 247 yards, threw 0 interceptions, and delivered 3 touchdowns.
Just incredibly efficient.
Yeah. He was distributing the ball perfectly to Tutu Atwell, Sam Laporta, and Rashee Rice, who ended up with 132 yards on 8 catches.
Which is huge for a receiver with a backup throwing to him.
It is. St. Louis absolutely crushed the Baltimore Stallions 37-11. It looks so effortless that I have to ask, is it actually an advantage in the playoffs to have a steady understudy who just flawlessly executes the script, rather than a panicked star trying to do too much?
Well, it depends on the script. They didn't just shrink the playbook, they shifted the entire cognitive load of the offense. When Tua Tagovailoa is running that system, he's asked to read the entire field, make complex pre-snap adjustments, and throw with immense anticipation.
Okay.
When Cooper Rush stepped in, the coaching staff recognized they needed to remove the variables that lead to the kind of turnovers we saw in Philadelphia and Las Vegas.
So how do you physically do that on the field?
You cut the field in half. The play designs for Rush utilized heavy play action to freeze the linebackers, and they flooded one side of the field with targets. Rush didn't have to scan from left to right.
His entire progression was right there in his immediate field of vision.
Exactly. Furthermore, they relied heavily on scheme-created separation. Those 247 yards weren't all deep, challenging throws down the sideline.
Oh, so a lot of yards after the catch.
Right, a massive chunk of Rashee Rice's 132 yards came after the catch. They designed quick, high-percentage throws that allowed their playmakers to work in open space.
They kind of turned the quarterback into a point guard. His only job was to just distribute, initiate the offense, not to be the primary scoring threat.
And you can see the stark contrast when you look at the other sideline in that same game. Matthew Stafford, a Super Bowl-winning veteran, struggled mightily for Baltimore against that St. Louis defense.
Yeah, Stafford went 20 for 40, threw for only 173 yards, and had 2 interceptions.
It's a complete inversion of expectations.
It really is. The career backup looks calm and surgical, while the seasoned veteran looks entirely out of sync. Which leads us to the Arizona versus Atlanta game.
Where the adversity wasn't an injury, but a devastating early scoreboard deficit.
Right, Arizona went down 13-0 almost before the fans had found their seats. Joe Burrow hit CeeDee Lamb for a quick 18-yard touchdown strike.
Just an explosive start for Atlanta.
Yeah, and then on Arizona's ensuing possession, C.J. Gardner-Johnson jumped an Aaron Rodgers pass, intercepted it, and returned it 30 yards for a pick six.
A 13-point deficit in the first quarter of a playoff game creates an immense psychological gravity.
I can only imagine.
The natural human instinct, and we see this across the league, is to press the panic button. Teams abandon their identity. They start calling vertical passing concepts on every down, trying to score 13 points on a single play.
Which just plays right into the hands of a pass rush that no longer has to respect the run.
Exactly. But Arizona refused to take the bait.
They really did. They didn't panic, and they ended up outscoring Atlanta 34-7 for the rest of the game, winning 34-20.
It's an incredible turnaround.
Rodgers engineered a massive 52-yard drive right out of halftime, connecting with Jalen Waddle for 2 crucial touchdowns along the way. They maintained possession of the football for over 34 minutes in that game.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, Arizona's comeback is a testament to profound institutional discipline.
How so?
Well, Aaron Rodgers has played enough football to know that you don't beat a 13-point deficit with heroics, you beat it with compounding execution. By refusing to become a one-dimensional passing team, they kept Atlanta's defense honest.
And they kept their own defense rested.
Right. They methodically chipped away at the lead, which actually transfers the psychological pressure back onto the team that is currently winning. Atlanta had to watch their early leads slowly evaporate while standing freezing on the sideline.
Which brings up a critical question about the structural foundation of these resilient teams. We've talked about protecting backup quarterbacks and overcoming early deficits.
Yeah.
But tactically speaking, what allowed St. Louis and Arizona to execute those game plans? The through line in every single one of these winning reports is a punishing, almost archaic commitment to the ground game, paired with ruthless situational execution.
It is the great stabilizer of postseason football. When the weather drops and the defensive intensity spikes, the rushing attack removes the variance from the equation.
Let's run down the numbers because they are just staggering. Denver survived a game where their quarterback, Geno Smith, threw for a grand total of 77 yards.
Just 77 yards.
77 yards. How is that possible? Well, because Derrick Henry became an absolute force of nature. He ran the ball 26 times for 174 yards and a touchdown.
He broke off 6 different runs of at least 10 yards.
He essentially rendered the forward pass obsolete for that afternoon.
Pretty much.
And St. Louis did the exact same thing to support Cooper Rush. They leaned heavily on Ramondre Stevenson, who carried the ball for 155 yards, averaged 7 yards every time he touched it, and found the end zone.
Which completely took the pressure off Rush.
Exactly. And then Arizona completely suffocated Atlanta's hopes of a late comeback by grinding out 174 rushing yards as a team. Bijan Robinson led that charge with 106 yards.
And they capped the game off with a 17-play, 9-minute drive in the fourth quarter.
A 9-minute drive.
Yeah, a 9-minute drive in the fourth quarter is not just a statistical achievement, it is a physiological weapon.
So what does this all mean? With all the rule changes favoring the modern passing game, it feels like we're reverting to 1980s football. Have we come full circle, where a high-flying passing attack just gets you to the dance, but just handing the ball off and chewing clock actually wins the trophy?
This raises an important question about how we fundamentally value offensive strategy. The passing game, like Joe Burrow throwing for nearly 300 yards in a losing effort, is a highly volatile asset.
High risk, high reward.
Right. It yields explosive returns, but it carries massive risk. A dropped pass stops the clock. A tipped ball becomes an interception. A missed block results in a sack and a fumble.
And in the regular season, you can get away with that.
Exactly. The volume of plays smooths out that volatility. In the playoffs, that volatility will send you home.
Because the rushing game guarantees the clock keeps ticking.
Yes, and it does two other vital things. First, it dictates the physical terms of engagement. When Derrick Henry is hitting a defensive front 26 times, he is accelerating the accumulation of lactic acid and physical fatigue in those defenders.
Yeah, just get worn down.
By the fourth quarter, a defensive line that has been defending the run all day simply cannot generate the explosive burst required to rush the passer.
That makes so much sense.
Second, it protects your own weaknesses. When Arizona held the ball for a 9-minute, 17-play drive, they ensured that Joe Burrow and CeeDee Lamb were trapped on a cold bench.
Utterly incapable of altering the outcome of the game.
Exactly. It's the ultimate defensive strategy executed by the offense.
And that philosophy extends directly into situational football. We saw a stark contrast in the red zone and on fourth down across these matchups.
It really did.
St. Louis reached the red zone 6 times and scored on 5 of those trips. Meanwhile, Baltimore pushed into St. Louis territory but failed on 5 of their 7 fourth down attempts.
The field shrinks in the red zone, the throwing windows close, and if you can't run the ball to pick up 2 yards on fourth down, your season is over.
It is the ultimate test of efficiency.
The teams that advanced didn't necessarily accumulate the most yards, they maximized the leverage of the yards they did gain.
Well, let's synthesize what we've uncovered today. This wildcard weekend was an absolute masterclass in the realities of high-stakes execution. We learned that playoff survival is entirely decoupled from the illusion of statistical dominance.
Which is a hard pill to swallow for some fans.
Yeah, amassing 400 total yards is completely meaningless if you pair it with 4 turnovers.
The margin for error shrinks to 0, and the teams that thrive are the ones built to mitigate risk.
We saw that survival is about insulating your vulnerabilities, whether it's shifting the cognitive load off a backup quarterback like Cooper Rush, or having the institutional discipline to methodically claw back from a 13-0 deficit.
Instead of hitting the panic button and abandoning your strategy.
Right. And ultimately, it's about controlling the variables. You run the ball to keep the clock moving, you exhaust the opposing defense, and you keep their explosive weapons freezing on the sideline.
These are principles of crisis management that extend far beyond the gridiron.
And I want to tie this directly back to you listening right now, because the mechanics we just broke down apply to almost any high-pressure environment.
Absolutely.
If you're prepping for a boardroom presentation where half your slides get deleted, or you're managing a complex project and your lead engineer suddenly quits, the lesson from this weekend is profound. Success in a crisis rarely belongs to the team with the prettiest initial blueprint or the most theoretical resources.
It belongs to the leadership that can diagnose the new reality and adapt without compounding the error.
You don't try to win the game back on one desperate play. You simplify the decision-making process for your team. You rely on the fundamental systems that reduce variance.
And you let the competition bankrupt themselves with unforced errors.
You control what you can control, and you execute the next step.
And for these surviving teams, the next step represents a massive escalation in difficulty.
It certainly does. Looking ahead to the divisional round, we're going to see if these survival tactics hold up against rested opponents. The Denver Golds have to pack up their relentless running game and travel to play the San Diego Fleet.
That's going to be a tough one.
Yeah. Meanwhile, those gritty 6'9" underdog DC defenders are taking their chaotic blitz packages to the Windy City, where they will face the absolute juggernaut, the #1 seed Chicago Fire.
It's going to be fascinating to see if DC can speed up the processing clock of a veteran quarterback the way they did against a rookie.
That matchup alone will test every theory we've discussed today.
It really will. But before we wrap up our analysis of this wildcard weekend, I want to leave you with a lingering thought regarding the very structure of this competition. We spent this entire deep dive exploring how a sudden death playoff environment completely rewrites the rules of engagement.
It's a completely different sport than what they play in October.
It really is. So consider this. If a team with a losing 6-9 record, like the DC Defenders, can advance in the postseason simply by utilizing high-risk blitzes to capitalize on 4 specific turnovers against an opponent that vastly outgained them, does a grueling 15-game regular season actually determine who the best team in the league is?
Oh, wow.
Or does this sudden death playoff format simply reward the teams most capable of manufacturing and surviving chaos on one specific Sunday in January?
Now, that is a question that challenges the entire premise of crowning a champion. Keep that thought in mind the next time you see a box score that looks completely divorced from the final result. Thanks for taking this deep dive with us today.